Okay, welcome back for another round of play with our minds, all right? Now, I've been doing some thinking, and I've tried this idea with a couple of people now, and they've picked it up pretty easily, so I'll try to make a video on it. What I want you to conceive of for this thought play exercise is you standing in the middle of a whole bunch of railway lines. For 360 degrees around you, there is all railway lines. There is no trees, no mountains, no rivers, no oceans in any direction, just flat land. And in each direction, you can see these train lines stretch into and over what we call the horizon. Now, imagine yourself standing directly straight on. The first two that you look at, they're going to be right there, and they're going to go right up to the horizon, and they're going to join at the horizon there. We all know that. We've seen it a million times. But what if the immediate next train track to that was then laid out sequentially all the way around, right? First of all, that means that each train track is not exactly parallel with each other. But still, you put tracks in the middle of the places where there was gaps. You filled the gaps with extra tracks, even if they were shorter than the ones that run the entire length of the horizon. So what we've got is not a whole bunch of tracks laid out like this. We've got tracks laid out in a circle around us, which means that we're looking at something where each one of these lines is one set of tracks. Something like this, where we're standing in the middle and it spirals out from there into the horizons, like all of the distances. You see how it's all closer at the center and further apart at the edges? Well, yeah, but at the edges we know that they join. So that's what I mean, is each one of these joins at the edge. This one joins at the edge, but then all of these spaces in between are filled up with other railway lines as well, whether they're 4 meters long or whether they're 400 kilometers long to fill it out, and then there's more tracks put in those smaller places and smaller places. I think the proper term for that is like in a calculus sort of way. Then I imagine what we would end up with is a very interesting circumstance where we could deduce a few things about our reality. Let's play with that. Number one is, if you were there looking at one, and then you started to move to the next one to look at the next track, remember, each track that is able to go over the horizon means that there's a further gap as they go further apart, not that they're laying out like this and that there's no gap in between. So that's why you have to fill the spaces. But my idea is, as you begin to move, you would see some of these lines separate on the horizon and come together in other places. Kind of like what you would get when you're looking at a fly screen and you're looking at it in a certain angle and you can see the, what's the term? Moira pattern come out of it. It's the curvy lines that come out of all the straight lines when they come together like that. So what we've got here is like that illusion, except played out in a real life format on a grand scale of our perspective, where we can imagine that all out. Now, I've been playing with this idea a little bit because I live on the ocean, so I can see horizontally out like that, and I can imagine as I'm moving about, and because I understand how sight works and how it's distorted by the brain, and not an accurate representation of what we're actually perceiving, but an interpretation of what we're actually receiving, then I can see this clear as day. Because what we're doing is we're not actually seeing what's out there. We're receiving photons of light. And those photons of light come to us, usually, in a curved format. And we won't see exactly a pixel. We might see the track that it comes from too. But our mind knowing that we have concave eyes, lays and splays that out on a flat screen, which means all of the curved lines that come up over the horizon and into our eyes gets laid out flat to make it look like a flat horizon. This would give rise to what I'm suggesting, an illusory appearance in the railway lines as you would move across them looking around. This same illusionary aspect that I'm hinting at, I think, is also displayed in other places where the human mind hallucinates, like in deserts and over large horizons, or when there's a hot day and you get all of that heat haze come through. That's a similar effect. And what this effect is the brain interpreting or cutting out or removing information based on chaos, lack of interpretation, lack of accuracy, lack of representation. So as the heat rises in the desert example, the heat is distorting the information. There's a lot more information. There's only so much awareness and so much vision. So some of that gets lost out and gets repeated through patterns. We can't see everything. So the things that we don't see get cut out like that. We can't see the temperature, but we see the effect that it has on the aspects around it. We can't see reality, we see photons of light and the effect they have on reality. But when we're looking down the channel of a photon of light, it would be visually reconstructed, I do believe, in a straight line, giving rise to the idea that there are basically no straight or flat or curved lines. The reason why is because the curved line that comes in to begin with has to be understood with the concept of the reconstruction of the human mind. So you have to then take this completely illusory and imaginary language that we call reality to describe what's actually happening. And I think that's the wrong way that it's meant to go, really. I mean, that's the only way that we can do it, and so we do the best that we can. But in that, that's where we get the classic scenario of science and real science, which is just open curiosity about what doesn't work. It is not about solidifying real fact, because we know fundamentally that even if we just sit and contemplate our reality with basic thought exercises, we can understand how this is not a flat nor a round earth, that these are all reconstructions of concepts that we've labeled with fancy words, that we call these things. And people go, oh yeah, of course, I know. They're all representations or ideas, fingers pointing at the mood. But then you will see them also take a blade to their neighbor and go, you're wrong. Getting caught in the illusion, forgetting that it's not really worth killing somebody over in a lot of cases, metaphorically and literally speaking, I guess, across the course of history. But what we would end up looking at if we were to contemplate this idea playing out, what I'm sort of hinting at with the first diagram that I sort of showed here, is kind of understanding it like this. So you begin to see how this played out, and you get the gaps in between them, and then on the horizons they join. But then if you start to move about, you'll see the lines start to disconnect. They'll disconnect more, and they'll reconnect in different ways, creating a different pattern based upon your perception of where you're standing and the data that is cut from the editing floor of your visual cortex, your brain. Not what you're seeing, but your brain cutting it out. And what we would end up with is something that we're all pretty familiar with, which is something a bit more like this, but infinity in every direction. which would, in theory, like a lot of the greatest minds are suggested, in certain ways or another, in some form or another, in some understanding or another, in this sort of logic of understanding it, if reality was a bunch of photons and that's all that it was, then this would mean that everything sort of will curve back on itself at some point or another. And the curvature is what is understood as what we call gravity, or what is done because of gravity in certain ways. Now, that's not the gravity that everybody is arguing about. That's just what is the thing that could be attributed with the curvature of these photons of light. Why don't they just travel in straight lines? Why do they curve? That's basically the answer. But the answer is a placeholder. It's not this is exactly what it is. Oh, it's this. No, this is exactly what it is. When we figure out what that is, we don't know so much yet. But there are wonderful ideas and great ways that we can contemplate such things, and there are plenty of places that are talking about these ideas in much better concepts like that. But I think that understanding how our visual world is constructed and manipulated within our own minds gives us a real leg up and an understanding of how we can get over the issues that we encounter in reality like that. Because what we encounter in reality is a reconstruction in our minds. And that's pretty mad. Peace out.